Welcome to The Hook with Sarah Larson. I'm your host, Sarah Larson, and I'm excited to introduce today's guest, Tara Leson. Tara, I'd love for you to introduce yourself as far as what you do and all about that.
Yes, definitely. So I am Tara Leson. I have two businesses currently. I have a fitness business, Tara Leson Fit, where I coach women, and it's essentially at-home workouts, easy nutrition, and I coach them to, live a healthier lifestyle. A lot of them have weight loss goals, so we work through that, but it's all about making it easy for you to actually achieve that and not have to, go into the realm of fad dieting and supplements and all of those kind of things. So that is the first one. And then I also work with people in their businesses and help them develop offers, their programs, and it's a lot of strategy and planning. I'm big into the planning piece, strategy, how we are actually going to get you to reach your goals. And that is by having a specific plan to get there and specific targets and things that we need to do to move your business forward. So
Great.
that is what
And
I
is
do.
that mainly working with online businesses?
It's been mostly online. So that is essentially my client base right now. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. All right. Well, let's go back in time and visit your childhood. Where did you grow up? What was your family life like? Share a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, for sure. So I grew up in Saskatchewan, Canada, where it is either absolutely freezing or we go to extreme heat. So it's a very, very interesting mix there, kind of in the middle of nowhere. But I grew up in Saskatoon, specifically in the city. I'm now out in Martinsville, which is a little town just outside of there, but that is where I grew up. And I have one brother. He's just 3 years younger than me, I guess. Um, and we did not get along well when we were growing up. We do now. We get along amazingly now, but we fought a lot when we were younger, so that was interesting for my parents. Um, yeah, so that's kind of where I grew up and
Okay.
mhm,
Now, for the geographically challenged, where
mhm.
in Canada is Saskatchewan?
So we are between Alberta and Manitoba. We're in the
Okay.
middle there.
And
So
to get more
further west.
specific, are you in the middle? Are you East Coast, West Coast?
Further west, but
Further
there's
west.
still
Okay.
two provinces before we actually get to the ocean.
Okay, great. Okay,
Mhm.
I'm picturing it better now. I am
Yes.
not um, very good at geography. That was not my
No.
talent or interest, I should
Yeah.
say.
That's me as well. Anytime that anyone is telling me where they're from in the US, I'm like, I
Yeah,
don't know. Like some places are obvious, I know, but
right.
if you're somewhere in the middle, I am sorry. I
Right.
don't
It's
know.
I'll tell you what, even I grew up in the what we consider to be the Midwest. I grew up in Michigan, and even
Mhm.
I don't know all of the middle of the country.
Yeah.
Where I kind of know generally where places are. I now live in Virginia, which is on the East Coast, and I'm
Oh,
pretty
okay.
close to the ocean, so it's easier to describe.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah. All right.
definitely.
So why did you what was it about you and your brother when you were younger that you weren't getting along as well as you obviously you grew out of that?
We did. My brother, he would push my buttons all the time, and he had to be doing that. I don't know what it was, but he was always pushing my buttons and I would react. We had a lot of big fights. There was actually, my parents loved telling the story. I don't know why, but there's a story that they always tell that they had left us in the car and went into get groceries or something, went into a store quickly. And when they got to the checkout counter, the person that was working at the cash register was looking out the window at the car, watching two kids fight pretty, punches are being thrown,
Wow.
and my parents are like, "Oh, it's fine. Like that's just our kids. They'll deal with it." And they always say like the look on their face was just utter shock, but yeah, they always tell that story and I'm like, hmm, hmm.
Okay. Well, that's all right. So you had both your parents at home,
Yes.
and so did you go directly to college after high school? What was your trajectory?
So after high school, I actually moved to Winnipeg for a bit of time. That was about 8 hours away from where I was from, and decided to move there because I had met a guy and I thought that it would be a good idea.
Sure. It's always
Um,
about a guy.
right. So moved there, and I really wanted that freedom away from my parents, even though they really weren't that strict. Like now you look back on it and you think like really did not have it bad. But when you're that age, you just always are, thinking that it's essentially worse than it is, I guess. Um, so I wanted that freedom. I wanted to, do it on my own, go out there and see what happened. So I took the bus. I put all of my stuff in massive packing boxes. And it was almost too much to even take on the bus, but they allowed me to. I don't know why, but they did.
Wow.
And took the trip out there. I think I had $200 in my bank account. Like it was ridiculous. I have no idea how this even happened, like how I actually made it, but I did. So took the trip out there, and actually lived with three guys in an apartment when I first moved out there, which was quite interesting to say the least. Not something that going back I would choose to do, but when you're that age, you just go along with what happens. And I got a job working at, interestingly, an online pharmacy. So we sold, and it was totally legal. This was not like a sketchy thing. It was real. We had like actual pharmacists working there and things like that. But we sold medications to people who lived in the United States because it was a lot cheaper. So I worked there, and I essentially was on the calls with people, setting up, what they needed, things like that. So that's kind of where I first worked there. And I worked there for a couple years, because, I mean, the pay was decent and it was just, whatever, we'll do this for a bit. But I did end up going to university while I was living in Winnipeg. I went to the U of M and started on my psychology degree. I didn't initially think it was going to be psychology. I actually wanted to go into microbiology, and I had this dream of studying infectious diseases, which is, well,
Very interesting.
yeah, yeah. And it's not at all what I ended up doing.
Right. Was that because you had been in pharmacy, working in the
No,
pharmacy, that you had that interest?
it's weird. It's something that I had always wanted to do. Strangely enough, I would watch like documentaries and stuff even when I was younger about it, which is so weird. Like it sounds so weird thinking about it now, but I just found that really interesting. And you know making trying to make a cure for cancer, or things like that. That's what I really wanted to get into. But when I started the microbiology courses, um in the labs, we were having to look through the microscopes and that to look at the cells and whatever. And it made me so nauseous that I
Oh
couldn't get through the
no.
labs. So that was out. that's where that kind of stopped.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. That makes
Hmm.
complete sense. So you studied psychology instead. That was the alternative.
Yes, and that was something that I was also fairly interested in. I always thought with that that I would end up actually working um studying like serial killers. I really love true crime. That sounds so morbid, but someone has to do it, right?
Right.
So I found that so interesting, and that's what I had always wanted to get into. But when I finished my degree, I then learned how hard it was actually going to be to get there. And the program that I wanted to go into only took 4 applicants, and there was um, over 200 people that applied. So your chances to get in were extremely low. And by this time, I had also moved back to Saskatchewan. Um, and they only took one person from Saskatchewan. Everyone, the other three were from elsewhere. So,
Wow.
yeah, yeah. So it was kind of deciding whether I wanted to go through the entire process because it was a big thing. Like you had to write a big paper, have a bunch of panel interviews. Like it was quite a process. So I had to decide whether I wanted to do that and probably have to do it for multiple years before I actually got in or something else. So
Yeah.
I decided that that was not the way I wanted to go.
Wow. So what
Yeah.
did you end up doing?
So when I got my psychology degree, it's kind of positioned as you can do more than what you actually can when you get it because they list all these jobs and it's like you could do all of these things, but when you actually get out you realize that you need more education, and whether that's getting a master's degree, other certifications, things like that to actually do the jobs that they listed. um, that was not ideal. So I
Okay.
didn't actually work in psychology, but I started working at the running room and I managed there for a bit. I was already big into like fitness, running, things like that. So it just kind of came naturally and managed there for a while, taught their coaching programs for running, everything from, learn to run up to full marathon. So did all of that. And during or right before that time, I guess I had my son. So he was in the picture, and the marriage was breaking down.
Yeah. So
Mhm.
tell me about that. At what point did you meet and marry your husband at that time? That was the father of your son?
So we met when we were 18. That is who I moved to Winnipeg for, essentially. Um, and we got married when I was 21. So very young, very young.
That is very young.
Yeah.
Um, yes. We
Hmm.
know so little at that age, but we always think that
Yes.
we know everything, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. And it was essentially, looking back on it now, it's definitely, I felt as though I had very low self confidence, and I felt as though I would not be able to find anyone else if I didn't settle or take this chance. I thought that that was going to be it. So I just went with it.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so after your son was born, things
Hmm.
started to break down.
Well,
Were they already,
yeah.
you said there were already some signs, right? So
Yeah.
tell me
Yeah.
tell me
So,
more about this. Tell me the story.
so my son came into the picture. I had him when I was 25. Um, and thinking about that now, it seems young because people have kids so much older than that, but I wasn't that young, I guess. But yeah, it had already been breaking down somewhat. We didn't see each other a lot because he worked a ton. He wasn't home a lot. And there was just, you could feel it just wasn't right. It just didn't feel right. And there were a lot of issues that should have been talked about and addressed that weren't. Um, and after my son was born, it got exponentially worse because I was raising him essentially on my own. Um, I had very little help. So, very little help from his dad, I should
Hmm.
say. My parents lived really close to us, which I was really appreciative of because they helped a lot. My mom helped a lot. And actually, that is more so what my son remembers is that my mom was there a lot and I was there a lot. So,
Well, that's good. He's going
mhm.
to remember that at least. Hopefully, he's not remembering fighting and things like that so much.
He doesn't actually. He doesn't. He has said that he doesn't remember his dad being there a lot when he was
Mhm.
younger. And he was 3 when we got divorced. So he was pretty young and he doesn't remember much of anything that went on before that. I think we tried not to fight directly in front of him. Um, Although at the end it definitely escalated and that happened.
Yeah.
Um, and that was essentially the breaking point for me. And I remember actually the point that I told my mom that I was done,
Hmm.
like so vividly. It's funny. We were putting up the umbrella on my deck, like on the table on the deck, and I just remember looking at her and saying, like, I am not happy. I'm miserable, and I don't want to be here. I don't want to live this life. And I don't want to be stuck in this for the rest of my life. Like, this is not what I want. And I can't keep doing this.
Wow. What did she? What was her response? Was she very supportive of you at that point?
Yeah, she was. And she had seen a lot of the things that were going on. Um, so she didn't really expect it, but it didn't come as a huge surprise to her.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
So you obviously divorced. You
Yeah.
mentioned that that was the end of the marriage.
Hmm.
What was what was life like? You were on your own. Did you have any support?
Well, what happened was I actually when it all happened, I just decided one day that, like, I have had enough. I'm not living in this anymore. I am done. This is not what I want for myself, what I want for my son. We're not doing this. So I packed up our stuff and not took him, but like, we left and went to my parents. His dad got the house. He kept the house, and I lived at my parents' for almost a year with my son because we had essentially nowhere else to go. I was also left with zero in the bank account because all of that was taken out. just a couple of weeks after um, we decided to officially end things. So I had zero money, zero home, and had to go, yeah, to my parents and live there.
Mm-hmm. So did you, oh, what a, that's a tough
Yeah.
situation to be in, and especially with a son as well.
hmm
What did you do? Were you working, you were working at that time?
I was actually in between jobs because this is the other kicker. I had just had a surgery um, a week before I decided that I had, well, actually, it was 2 weeks because it was a week before my son's birthday. And a week after that was when we actually left. So I had just had surgery. I was not supposed to be doing much for about 6 weeks, not even picking him up. Like there were quite a few restrictions. Um, so I was in between jobs. And luckily, I was able to work at the clinic where, or the office where my mom was working because they needed someone else as essentially a receptionist. So I was able to do that. And another thing that I did immediately after we divorced was, or separated, was looked into applying for nursing because it was something that I had wanted to do for a really long time. And I was really held back from doing these things and doing what I really wanted to essentially push myself forward in life, like,
You were
grow.
looking for growth.
hmm
He wasn't interested in having you do that. Is that
Yeah.
kind of the situation?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, well, I'm glad that you were able to get away from that.
hmm
How was where were you at mindset wise at that point? I mean, that's a big change.
hmm
It had been, you know,
Yeah.
an ongoing situation.
Yeah.
What is your thought process at this point? How are you feeling?
So surprisingly, I actually felt better than I had felt in so long. I felt free. I felt just good about things. I remember me and my brother went out for ice cream or frozen yogurt, and we took my son. And I remember telling him that I was like, I just feel so free. Like I can actually do things that I want to do. I can go see my friends. Like, we can do this with you. And I haven't felt like this in years. And it
Wow,
just felt so good despite like some of the other things that were going on. It felt so much better and like a huge weight was finally lifted.
that's incredible. I,
hmm
something I've been thinking about recently, um, and talking about is the idea that the things that we hear and the things that we say to ourselves are very much heard in our bodies.
hmm
Um, we absorb those frequencies of the words, and
Yeah.
it affects us um, physically as well. And I described recently a situation where I had let go a client that um, really was not a positive person and not a
hmm
positive influence in my life, said some very unpleasant things about what I was doing. This was before my coaching business started,
hmm
another business. But when I let that go, it was just such a relief to be able to open my email inbox and know that there wasn't going to be um, an unpleasant message from this person.
Yeah.
And I can imagine that your situation must have been like 10 times that, as far as the relief that you felt from no longer having that in him
hmm
having access to your brain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, in a lot of ways it was. There's been a lot that's happened since, and I've had to really enforce strict boundaries, and stick to that in order to not allow him access
Yeah.
to me.
Unfortunately, when you have a child, that's not that having zero
Yeah,
access isn't always an option and
yeah.
generally isn't an option. So how
Hmm.
did you how did you create those boundaries to make sure that he didn't have as much access to you?
Um, I've done a lot of counseling. That's been
Yes, that's
huge.
great.
Um, yeah, a lot of counseling. And then it's just been, really defining what those boundaries are and saying, like, this is where communication will happen. This is what I will tolerate. If this is being said or, it goes here, I am not going to respond to that. We are not discussing these things because they don't mean anything to what is going on. Like, they're just irrelevant and we're not going there. And so it's just really enforcing those boundaries as to what I will put up with essentially and what I won't. Yeah.
Wow, that makes sense, and that's good that you've
Hmm.
set those. Um, you got your nursing degree, right?
Hmm.
And then what how did that lead to where you are now?
So, yeah, interestingly, I got my nursing degree and I still do nurse casually. But I got that. I also met my now husband, and we've been married for quite some time, um, and had a daughter together. So when I got really into nursing, because I got pregnant with her just as I was finishing, so I nursed for a little bit, went on mat leave, and then came back. Um, and I was doing ward nursing at the time, which was fine, but I really wanted something more. So I took the certification to go into the ICU. And that's where I have been working. And I've really enjoyed that. But then, of course, the pandemic hit. And, I think that that kind of threw a wrench in everyone's plan.
Yes, it's amazing when you talk about, I like to talk about disruption, and that is one that, always has an impact on
Mhm.
whoever I'm talking to. So what happened at that point? You were working in the hospital, and
Yeah,
I'm
it
sure that was crazy.
it was. It really was. And I had always been thinking about, I had wanted to do something with fitness for a really long time. I already had people like asking me about it and, recommendations on workouts and what they should eat and da 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 da. Um, and then, yeah, when the pandemic hit, that was a huge wake up call in terms of how we were actually being treated within the healthcare system. Um, as an employee, obviously, but um, there were talks of, especially because we worked in the ICU, us having to isolate away from our families for weeks at a time because no one knew what was going to happen. This was basically before any patients had even hit our hospital with COVID. Um, we had no idea what that was going to look like, how bad it was going to be. And you were hearing reports from everyone else about how bad it was. And so they were like, this may be something that has to happen, that you're going to have to be isolated away from your family if you're going to work here. Or it may be that the hospital locks down for a period of time and everyone just stays here, but you have to work because people have to be taken care of. And so when those talks were happening, me and my husband sat down and I said, I am not willing to put that in front of our family. I'm not willing to do that for a job. And I mean, I absolutely love nursing. I really, really enjoy it. I love taking care of my patients and like talking to the families. Like I absolutely love it. But I was not willing to have that come in front of my family.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense.
Hmm.
So you pivoted, obviously. You
Yeah.
left the hospital at that point.
I didn't fully leave. I stayed
Okay.
on casually so I could still, pick up shifts and that. And as I was building my fitness business, I would still have income coming in until it built up more. But yeah, I was in control of my schedule then. I could say when I was available, when I wasn't. And it worked as well around the custody schedule that I had with my son, because there was a lot of issues with the transition periods and things like that. So that was kind of causing an issue already before the pandemic. And so I had kind of been thinking about going casual due to the stuff that was happening there. And then this was just like the extra push that, yeah, this is your big sign that you need
Yeah.
to do this. So,
Okay.
yeah.
So what did you do instead?
So I started my fitness coaching business. I got certified in personal training, nutrition. I already had like education with nutrition through nursing as well. And I was always in fitness. So I had been, doing tons of research beforehand,
Yeah.
um, into like just making nutrition easier because that's the one thing that I think a lot of people find the hardest. It's not necessarily the workouts, it's getting consistent with the workouts. But that part is a lot easier than figuring out what you're going to do with your nutrition. And with all of the, crap that's out there, um, I wanted something that would actually work for a normal woman,
Yeah.
not someone who's got a million hours in their day. It's not, an influencer plan that, you have to meal prep every day for 10 hours at a time. Like nobody has time for that.
Yeah.
So I was already looking up these things and decided to start doing coaching on them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. And then, so what, then there was a transition because, or I'm
Hmm.
assuming there was another transition. But let's talk about what was that like? Um, how were you feeling when you realized that the situation with the hospital wasn't going to work for you? You know, that's
Hmm.
another, I mean, obviously, the overreaching disruption is the pandemic, but the effect that it had on our positions, on the careers that we had, on so many different careers, was really um, what sort of sent a lot of people off the rails with,
Yeah.
what is it like working from home and what does it look like, and um, how do we adjust to the mindset of having lost a job or changed that job? What was that like for you at that point?
Um, it was interesting. I talked again a lot to my counselor about it, because it was a struggle. It was, nursing was something that I really wanted to do and still love. So it was hard still making that decision, even though I knew it was the right one. It was
Yeah.
very, very tough to actually make that decision and then decide to, balance that and build my business and do the both of them. But counseling definitely helped me work through that a lot and just remind me of, why I was doing that, why I was making that choice. And so, yeah.
Well, it's good. It sounds like it was a good thing then that you were already doing counseling,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
ongoing, and it provided you with some help that a lot of people didn't go look for until much
Mm-hmm.
later,
Yeah.
and when things had gotten much worse up here.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really great. And then you are also doing this consulting, coaching with
Mm-hmm.
businesses to help create offers. How did you transition from the fitness into that?
So interestingly, this is kind of a funny story, but I I had been doing the fitness coaching for almost a year and a half. And well, yeah, about a year and a half. And I was enjoying it, but I had gone through a program with a coach that used a very cookie cutter model, like you had to do it this way, you have to have the one-on-one coaching and the group coaching and whatever. And that really did not feel good to me, but I thought that that was the way that this had to work, like that was the way this had to happen. And I was really starting to resent the business because it didn't feel right to me. It didn't feel good. I didn't like the idea of, now you should raise your prices even more. And I was like, no one's going to pay this. This is insanity. Like, I'm not doing this. I don't like that. There has to be more affordable options. And I kind of got to the point where I resented it so much that I was getting sick of even talking about anything having to do with fitness just because I didn't like how it felt.
Yeah.
And I had already been, it's funny, helping people on the side, especially some girls that had been in this program with me. They were asking me a lot of business questions and asking me different things, and I was helping them with their businesses, and growing them. And I was finding that I was going to different, free workshops, master classes, things like that, and looking at it from a business perspective rather than how would this fit into my fitness business.
Right.
And I was like, okay, I need to do something about this. I know that, I have the experience from other things. I have, managed businesses, I've had teams of people. Um, I've created programs through the College of Nursing, actually, um, and done all of these things. Like, I know that I can do this. So I decided to go for it. I have a different mentor now.
Hmm.
And I'm in another mastermind, which has been amazing. And so we talked it through and came up with a plan. And so I started integrating this other side with the offers, the programs, and the strategy and the planning.
Cool. I've seen the similar type of thing where
Hmm.
there's this very specific, you have to do this, this, and this,
Yeah.
and this is how you become successful. I took a course from another big name
Hmm.
that said this is how you need to do it. And it was so detailed and so step by step. It's simple to go through.
Hmm.
However, I just didn't feel like it was the right thing for me. And I just
Yeah.
feel like one of the things that I've really focused on in my coaching is that there is no cookie cutter that
Yes.
fits every business.
Yeah.
We have to figure out what is right for our business,
Hmm.
for what feels good to us, what feels aligned for us.
Yeah.
And it may not be charging crazy prices. It may not be um, doing your launch a certain way where you do this, webinar and that webinar, and then you
Hmm.
get them in your lead, the process. And I feel like the other part of that is that the world and the online world is evolving and people are
Yeah.
hip to that cookie cutter way in, and we have to come up with ways that are people are looking for more authenticity,
Yes.
and so it's really letting them get to know you And yes, they can get to know you in that stair step way, but if you're not comfortable with doing that, then it's going to come
Hmm.
across that you're not comfortable with
Yeah.
that. You're not going to believe in your offer. You're not going to be comfortable talking about your offer, and therefore it's going to flop.
Yes. Yeah.
So I love to hear that you also saw that and
Oh yeah.
decided to do something about that. So
Yeah.
tell me a little bit more about your approach. Are you
So
specifically working with women?
I do work with, yeah, I do work
Or,
with women.
okay,
Um, and it's really actually creating a plan as to how we're going to reach the goals that you want to reach. It's none of this like we're having divine downloads and connecting with the stars. Like it, that's not that's not real business.
mm-hmm.
So we talk about actual business processes and like things that you need to do and put together like a visibility plan. How are you getting yourself out there? How are you creating brand awareness? And it was very interesting because going back to the other coaching program,
Yeah,
this was something that was not talked about. Like I didn't even know that the networking that I know now exists. I had no clue that these things were going on.
I see.
um there was no talk of collaborating with anyone, and it was almost like you would be shunned if you did that. Like it was like, we don't do that here.
Oh, wow.
It was very strange. So we talk about visibility plan and how you can get out there, create brand awareness. We talk about your offer and building that so that it not only works for your clients really well and what they are needing, but also for your life. So
Mhm.
because there's so many people that will just throw something out there and they don't actually think through, okay, how many hours am I going to have to put into this to run it?
Yeah,
And then to do all the back end work to keep it running. Like there's so much that, you need to actually consider before you just throw whatever out there. And when you look at how you want your lifestyle to be, because I feel like we created businesses so that we could have that more time freedom, have that flexibility, all of those things. And if you're putting so much on your plate or you're structuring your offers, your programs in a certain way, it may not allow you that. So you have to always be thinking about what that's going to look like as well. Clear messaging is another big one, and making sure that people actually know what you do. There's quite a few people that you can go on their Instagram or go through their content, and you still have no idea what they actually do. So making that very clear so that people know what to expect. And that's the other thing, letting them know what to expect. Like, letting them know what's included, all of the things. It's none of this, oh, I'm going to hide that and like you'll just see it later. Um, being really clear about this because that's how people are going to want to work with you when they know what they're actually getting out of it. And then the connection piece and connection, building community. How are we going to, I don't actually love the term lead gen, although that's what it is, but it breaks it down into like such a robotic kind of thing where you're just, when you think of lead gen, you kind of think of sending out the cold messaging
right,
messages,
right.
which is not at all what I do or what I have my clients do. But it is instead creating authentic connections with people so that then they want to know more about you and how they can work with you. It's not going in and, oh, how's your business going? Are you at six figures yet? You know, no, like actually connect with them over something real. We are all real people, regardless of the fact that like we're on Instagram on the social media platform.
So that reminds me of one that I just want to tell you about. This
Hmm.
is one I keep getting from somebody who has followed me. This is what I dislike. Okay, follow me. So I don't know who you are. I know nothing about you. You followed me.
Yep.
And then you send me a DM and say, "Hey, how's Instagram working for you?" Okay, real subtle
Yeah.
because first of all, I know exactly you were trying to engage me in a conversation for me to tell you that Instagram's not working for me and oh, I can
Hmm.
help you with that, blah, blah, blah. That is not genuine,
No.
nor is it natural. If you
No.
want to create a conversation with someone, you comment and engage in their posting on what
Yes.
they're talking about. Engage there, create a real conversation.
Hmm.
Like, oh, okay, great. Hey, I see that. Or this is one I love. Hey, I love your content. I love connecting with people. And then you start a conversation, they go, "So what do you do?"
Hmm.
"Oh, you love my content, but you don't know what I do." And I know that it's out there. Like, first of all, you
Yeah.
didn't, like my podcast is very evident on my feed and Instagram. And
Hmm.
so I know that just at a glance, you can go, "Oh, I see you have a podcast. Tell me more about that." Or,
Yes.
"Hey, here's a suggestion. Go listen to an episode or even just a
Yes.
little bit of an episode. Get a gist for what it is that I do." If
Yeah.
you want to cultivate me as a client, you better
Hmm.
not come at me with that generic crap that you
No.
obviously didn't do any research. You're just, DMing everybody.
Yes. Yes.
So,
It's
fair warning
funny.
to anybody who's trying to get my business.
Yeah.
That's not how I
Exactly.
roll.
No. No. It's so strange to me because, and I always think of, and I know I've said this before in my stories or whatever somewhere. Would you say these things to a person in real life? If you were first meeting
Right.
someone, is that what you would say to them? Is that how you engage people in everyday life?
Right.
No. So why
It's
are you
not.
doing it on the internet? It's the same thing. Just because we aren't face to face, you're still talking to a real person. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
It's so
It
strange to
is.
me.
You have
Yeah.
to, you go into it, and it's funny. I was just talking about in one of my other networking groups, talking about the 10 commandments of networking. And the
Hmm.
first is, "Thou shalt not sell to me." When you
Yeah.
are meeting somebody for the first time, you don't immediately go into your pitch. That's not how that works. In
No,
person, it shouldn't work that way online either.
no, no. And, you know, yeah, it's so strange to me. It's so strange. And I will say, even, when I am talking to someone, if they ask me a question about my coaching or they have a question about something, I will answer in the DMs. Like, I'm not going to coach them
Yeah.
specifically, but I'm also not one of those people that gatekeeps things and is like, "Oh no, you have to pay me thousands of dollars before I will ever answer your question." Like,
Yeah.
just connect with people normally.
Right.
Be a normal human being. Like,
Yes.
yeah.
Absolutely. That's just not how I work. And I
No.
really wasn't on Instagram before
Hmm.
starting my coaching business. So
Yeah.
I really avoided social media like the plague.
Yeah.
And so when I came back, it had been several years before that I had really not interacted. And to discover all of these tactics that I was just like, ugh, I do not like this at all. And
Yeah.
and so that has definitely maybe impeded my or spurred on my reluctance to use a lot of those tactics, but also I still don't love social media. And I think
Hmm.
that some of my posts and things I haven't gotten that good at it or really worked
Yeah.
that hard at it because I don't love a lot of those tactics. So I'm trying to
Yeah.
figure out a way that is comfortable for me, that
Hmm.
feels more natural.
Well, and I think right now it's tough because very it's weird what is happening in the coaching industry.
Mhm.
And I actually talked about this today on my stories, and I'm going to be talking about it more because I found a couple of other people who are really speaking up about, what's happening at essentially the highest levels of coaching,
Mhm.
that, mega boss babes, for lack of a
Oh
better
God, I
term.
hate that term so much. I
Oh,
love
I
it
know.
about as much as I love hustle.
Yeah.
I hate
Yeah.
that word.
Right.
Boss babe, hustle, girl boss.
Oh, I know. So,
I'm not opinionated at all, as you can tell.
yeah, right? No, me neither.
I'm very careful about what I cultivate, what I curate for my Instagram feed and my Facebook feed. I really am very careful about what comes in here
Yeah.
into my head because there's a lot of nonsense out there. And there are people that even others really like
Hmm.
that I go, that's just not for me. And I don't
Yep.
like the message that I'm like, I don't feel good about the message that I'm being sent. And
Yep.
I'm gonna turn that off so that I don't have to hear that.
Hmm.
And it means that, I don't really follow a lot of people
Hmm.
because I'm just that careful
Yeah.
about what's coming in.
Yeah. That's what I've done as well. And actually, when I went I just took a little break from the fitness business and
Hmm.
I've completely remodeled it. It's totally different and it feels
Okay.
amazing now and it's doing so much better. But um, I went back on that one as well. And I just did a bunch of housekeeping, essentially deleted a bunch of people,
Yeah.
muted people, cleaned up stuff. And when I started my business one, I was just super intentional with who I
Hmm.
was going to follow, who was going to be on there.
Yeah, I agree too. And um, I think that I was most excited when I found out that you can actually unfollow people from you. Like you
Hmm.
can let people go. They don't have to know. Well, let's we'll kind of wrap up here, but where can people find you on the internet?
For sure. So I have my two accounts at Tara Leson Fit is my fitness one, and then at Tara.Leson is my business one. So
Okay.
either of those, you can find me. I am open to normal DM conversations.
Right. Great. Well, thank you for your time. So it was so nice to get to know you a little better today.
Thanks for having me on.